Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of our SoundTraxx Soundbites podcast. This is Train Talk from Milepost 141. And today we have your host, George Bogatuk, and his little minion lackey over here, Norman Carnaby.
Yeah. Well, are we sure I'm the minion today? You were the one who was slacking, apparently.
Well, I have a good reason for that.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, today we're going to dive into a couple of little topics. We've got another interview coming up.
Yeah.
So that'll
really
be
neat
exciting.
one this time around.
Yeah, this one's a real special one. So we'll allude to that in just a minute. First off, the podcast's been doing really well, so thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully this has been entertaining and keeping you guys informed also, showing you guys some new projects. I mean, one of the biggest things about this is that Norman and myself, we're not just, doing a job. I mean, we actually live the hobby.
Oh, yeah.
So for us, this is actually an enjoyment because what is it they always say? What is it they always say? When you love what you do, you don't work for a day. You don't work a day or something like that.
You don't work a day. If you enjoy your job, you're not going to work a day in your life. Or I think something like that.
Something along those lines. But the point is the fact that we enjoy doing this. This is our hobby as well. Mm-hmm. We get paid in the industry now. And one of the things I know I enjoy, and you probably are the same way because, you and I have a lot of the same thoughts, but when it comes to sharing the cool things that we've been able to bring to you as a company, as SoundTraxx, bringing that out and showing you all the cool stuff that we can do with our decoders, I always feel like I'm a little bit from the inside sharing all these secrets that not a lot of people know about or spend the time to research because there's so many cool things built into these decoders.
But they're really not. It's all in the user's guide.
Well, it's not secret. You're right.
Yeah.
It's not a secret. It's all built in. It's all written in the user's guide, but there's so much in there. I mean, let's face it, all right? We're guys. We don't read manuals. And that's one of our biggest challenges that we always encounter is reading the manuals. So I encourage you guys to check out, at least, if nothing else, check out Chapter 1 of the user's guide. It explains a lot of what you're hearing and what you're doing. So when you start going in there and just randomly programming CVs and doing whatever, at least you have a concept of what you're doing. So, but anyway, I didn't want to dive too much into that topic this week.
Maybe something to touch on next week.
Yeah, something to touch on a future one. We'll dive into all the different manuals and things like that, but be sure to check that out on the website. So, as Norman alluded to, I'm the big slacker this week. Now, I'm a slacker of the grande type.
Yes, you even wrote that in your notes.
I did, because that's a secret alluding to something that I'm working on that I don't have ready yet. So,
okay. I guess we'll see it, next time? Episode after?
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope it'll be done by then. But anyway, so I've been kind of working on some other projects. I've also been doing some work for a friend of mine, doing some side work here and there. Yeah. So don't call in with your solicitations. I'm not taking business. I'm not taking work. These are friends of mine that I'm doing work for. So be sure to check out your hobby shop for installations and stuff like that.
Yes,
but
full list on our website.
Yep. But anyway,
it's surprising how many people don't even know that's there.
Yeah, that's true. Where can I go? Where can I get? Go to our website. It has them all listed out.
It's under company and authorized retailers, and we even denote which ones do installs.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've determined that I'm a complete slacker this particular episode, you've got a car in front of us.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that. What do you got?
This has been something that's been on my desk for a while. It is a Rapido UK. If you don't know, Rapido Trains has a UK division. It is a Rapido Trains UK Dynamometer car. These were used, this particular model was one used by the LNER, and in fact, this very car recorded Mallard's record speed run.
Okay. What's the LNER for those of us who are uninformed?
London and Northeastern Railway. They're one of the big four. This one here is actually it's later. It's the same car, but it's in a later paint scheme. So this is as this car appeared in BR ownership.
Okay.
So it has slightly different paint jobs, slightly different lettering. The number is different because BR adopted a different numbering scheme.
Okay.
Because they had a ton of stuff that they inherited from the Big Four. So they had to come up with a numbering scheme to figure everything out because they had to amalgamate everything.
Okay.
And that was interesting.
Gotcha. So what all have you done to the car? I mean, it's a beautiful car. It's got that,
most of the detailing is actually stock.
Is that a wood grain on the outside, or is that just like a bronze coloring, or what
it's wood grain because these were made of wood.
Okay, so they polished the wood on the outside of it, whereas like most domestic railroads would, instead of painting them up like that or staining the wood, they would have just painted it a color.
Well, that's mostly because this is actually a much older coach. This is by this point in BR ownership, and even most of the during the Big Four era, cars were painted.
Okay.
It's just this one, it wasn't really worth it to build new dynamometer cars.
Okay.
So they just kept updating this one and updating this one and updating this one and updating this one.
Fair enough.
Ad infinitum. It survived well into the 60s.
So what would this represent here in this particular... You said this was later than the famous Mallard Run.
Correct, but it's still doing fundamentally the same job.
Well, be that as it may, what era would this paint or this?
So this is BR, so
okay,
1950s.
So got it. Okay, that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, because I'm modeling early 50s, so this is accurate for that era.
Okay.
But what a dynamometer car does is it's basically a lab on wheels.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look, which end is it on? Is that the train plug on this end? Yes, it is. So if we look on this end,
flip out that screen out there so that you can see what you're looking at.
If we look on this end, right there, you see that little bronze plug?
Okay.
That's the train plug. So what they would do is they would actually basically wire up a steam locomotive with a whole whack ton of sensors, feed them all back into this thing, and they've got all kinds of neat equipment. If you actually look in the windows there.
Yeah, I was noticing there's a lot of interior details here as well, which is...
I did fit this with a sound car, so...
You have some of the lights on the inside? Okay, that helps.
So you can actually see some of the equipment in there.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
There's all kinds of neat little sensors and whatnot, but the dynamometer car also has its own built-in sensors. If we come around here...
You see that wheel down there, and that rides the rail so they can get at miles per hour.
Mm-hmm. Along with
kilometers per hour.
Well, no, at this point they were still using miles an hour.
Oh, okay.
Actually, even today the UK still uses a weird hybrid.
Oh, okay.
They use kilometers an hour for some things and miles an hour for others.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, that's a cool car. I mean, they did a really good job with it. And then, of course, with sound car, you've got some sounds on there. What were you able to utilize with the sound car? What were you able to put in there besides lights?
So the lights were actually factory fitted. Okay. One of the more interesting challenges with this is I had to basically reverse engineer and figure out what the Rapido light board did and how it operated, and then figure out where to tap into it. So I ended up having to remove a couple of components and solder the light wires from the sound card to it. Because I was able to tap into that motherboard, though, once I figured out where to tap in, it was actually very easy.
Okay.
I didn't even need to wire up a common positive. I just attached the FX6 output to a specific pad, and everything works.
Oh, okay.
So
there's just one light, just one interior light. Then there's no externals.
No, there's no externals. Okay. But if you look up here in the roof, these are lit as well.
Okay.
So you can see how they're sort of opaque back.
Yeah, it's hard to see with all the lights around.
Yeah, we're obviously under studio lighting, but
look awesome and dark.
That lights up as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you do add, of course, your wheel clickety clack
Yep.
and your brake squeal, stuff like that. So that way it sounds.
It's got the momentum, yeah.
Yep. So it matches up your operations of your locomotives.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool. That's a really neat car. I like it.
Yeah.
Yep. There you go.
Now that I've got it going, you can hear it, and obviously brakes as well.
Yep.
So. And as with all my stuff, it has the NEM pockets, so I can just fit the KDs to it.
Yeah. The KD scale knuckle. These aren't the scale. These
No,
are
they're
just
not the scale. They're just the
they're
regular.
the
I don't think
KD
they make
adapters.
the scale knuckles for the NEM pockets. I could be wrong,
Got it.
but I don't think I've seen that.
I hadn't seen it either, but to be
Yeah.
fair, I don't really look at the NEM adapter stuff
True.
either. So. Okay.
So.
Well, that's a cool car. I can't wait to see it running behind some of your engines.
Oh yeah.
If we were thinking ahead, we probably would have brought one here and had it run back and forth, so it would have just been neat. But that's cool. No, I like it. They did a good job on it.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, adding in the sound
And
and
they've got all the
illuminating the
the
lights and
underframe
everything.
detail as well, as is Rapido's want.
Right. Yeah, leave no wire, no bar, no anything unmodeled.
Yep.
So, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, I know you put a speaker in there. What kind of speaker did you put into it?
810154 Mini Cube.
So our mini cubes?
Yep.
Okay.
If you look closely, it's tucked right up at the front end there.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if
do
you can
it.
see it that well on camera.
May not have come through on that multiple.
I think you can just about see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hidden pretty well up in there. I chose this end partly because it's actually very near where I located the decoder.
Okay.
And also because it has these on the side, which sort of help block the
Yep.
view in.
Yeah,
so
got it.
it's
So
nice
it kinda
and
hides
hidden
it a
up
little
there.
bit.
Yeah, I debated putting it in the bathroom. So if you look around on this side, these windows, if you pop the shell, there's a toilet in there.
Oh, wow. Well, leave it to Rapido. Nothing left unmodeled.
But so that was the other prospective place I was looking at siting it, was sticking the speaker in the bathroom.
Got it. No, I think you chose well, because that way you didn't have to remove anything to make room for that speaker. So when it comes to speaker choice, now I know that 810154 really pairs well with the sound card.
Yes.
But one of the biggest challenges that I know you face as our support department is a lot of people still think that they can put one of those mini cube speakers with our Tsunami 2 and Blue Nami 2-watt amplifiers.
Yes. I'm glad you specified the 2-watt amplifiers, because you can use an 810154 by itself with the TSU N18, the TSU KN1, and the TSU 1100, because they have the 1-watt amplifier.
Right. So speak to that a little bit. Let's transition into that a little bit and talk about speakers.
What we're sort of talking about here is everybody's obviously familiar with speaker impedance, right? Every audio amplifier is rated for a certain impedance. In this case, the entire Tsunami 2, Blue Nami, and Eco Nami stacks are all rated at 8 ohms. Actually, so is SoundCar. But within that stack, you will have audio amplifiers with different wattage ratings. And this determines, crudely, volume. Crudely, this determines how much volume you can get out of an audio amplifier. The trick, though, is you need a speaker capable of handling that output wattage. So with something like the 1100, or in this case the SoundCar, they only have a 1-watt amplifier. They're not going to get particularly loud, but you can use a much smaller speaker, like a Mini Cube, by itself with them. As you step up in those wattages, you're going to be able to get more volume output, but you also need to be more careful in your speaker selection. Because if the amplifier is trying to output 2 watts and your speaker is only capable of 1 watt, where's that power going to go? It's trying to push more power than the speaker can handle. And either the speaker will fail, or the amplifier itself can actually be damaged by that.
Yeah, and you're seeing a lot of repairs when it comes to our amplifiers.
Yes, very, very frequently I will see someone pair either a 2200, a 21-pin, or a PNP8 with a single Mini Cube speaker.
Right.
And that can cause the audio amplifier to fail, and in the worst case scenario, that can actually cause failures in the rest of the decoder as well.
Well, the one thing I'll tell you, just from my personal perspective, is when these cubes first came out, I was kind of skeptical of it. I figured, well, small speakers, they don't really pump out very much volume because they are small. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we hear as our air is sound is air pressure traveling through the air.
Yeah.
And that air pressure from these little tiny speakers is not very strong. And so when you put one cube speaker in a model, you tend to want to crank it up because that way you're getting as much air pressure as you possibly can.
Larger speaker diaphragm would normally translate
correct.
to
and so
more air pressure movement.
So I was initially skeptical of these things because I figured most people were converting to these cubes because, I don't have to make as much space for it. And at the time they first came out, really, a 2-watt amplifier, we were just starting to put out our Economies and the Tsunami 2s. And so I figured it was just more of people just being, for lack of a better term, lazy so they don't have to make enough space. Because at the time these first came out, our 16 by 35, which fills the footprint of 2 cubes, actually was the primary use of speaker, especially with like our partners at Athearn or other places like that.
And the 28 mil round.
And their 28 millimeter round. And so they were definitely having those rated for a nice good volume, 2 watts and stuff like that, but the amplifier was never taxing it. And so I figured, you're just being lazy, not putting it in there. But I'll honestly admit that when I finally became a cube convert is when our audio engineer at the time, and you may meet him in a little bit,
don't let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah, well, we've already alluded to the special guest. So anyway, but he came on to me, he's like, come here. So I went in there and went into the lab, and he had 4 cube speakers hooked up in a series parallel configuration. And both of us were like...
For those of you who don't know, what that means is...
You take 2 speakers and wire them in series, and then you take the other 2 speakers and wire them in series, and then you parallel the pairs.
The 2 sets, yeah.
But anyway, he had them hooked up, and that brought it back down to an 8 ohm impedance.
Yep.
But now we had the capability of 4 watts with those speakers.
Yeah.
But anyway, he brought me in there, and we were listening to it. It was like, wow, okay, now we can really hear those low frequencies. Mm-hmm. Going back to, again, the description of volume as air pressure, with 4 of those cube speakers, which can actually physically rate it down to 100 hertz.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing how low they go.
It was pretty amazing, but what happens is when you're using one of these cube speakers in these models, you're not getting that low frequency because think of it like when you have headphones. You put your headphones on, you're hearing boom, 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 whatever, and then you pull them away, even like an inch, suddenly that boom, boom, boom becomes tss, 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 tss. And that's because those small little speakers don't have enough pressure to travel even that short distance when you pull your headphones away. And so when we're putting those speakers in our models, when I'm this far away, this is a couple of feet, I'm not hearing that low frequency. Mm-hmm. And so we as modelers tend to want to crank it up. And then that's where we start taxing our amplifiers and things like, and the speaker ratings. And so ideally you want to put 2 of these cube speakers in at the very minimum. Now in some cases, if you have room, put 4 of them.
Yeah.
I've got an Intermountain Tier 4 Gevo that I've done years ago that has 4 cube speakers in it, and that thing sounds fantastic. It really brings out that low end of that Gevo sound. And then I've actually got one of the Scale Train's regular Gevos that I put in 4 cube speakers. I put 2 in their place, and then I cut out a place where they had their Stay Alive capacitors.
Okay.
I cut that out and put 2 cube speakers there. So I've got 4 cube speakers in that thing. And again, those 2 units together sound fantastic. And then you add that level of detailing to it. That's a great train. I get a lot of compliments when I travel with it because they're like, wow, those things sound amazing. Well, I got 4 cube speakers in it. So, but when it comes down to it, just make sure when you're checking your decoder, make sure your speakers are rated for that or more.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to overdrive a speaker if it's rated higher than what the amplifier's putting out. I'll talk to people and I'll equate it to a river. If you have a dam that's able to handle 2,000 cubic foot per second, and if you flow 4,000 down, something's going to damage. Either the dam's going to blow up, or it's going to overflow and damage the town that it's protecting, or it might backflow and damage wherever's down the river. But if you have that 4,000 cubic foot dam and you send 2,000 cubic per second.
It's fine.
It's perfect. That's well within its handling. And so the amplifier is what's putting the flow down the river, and so your speaker's what's got to be able to handle that. So you want to make sure to pair those up correctly.
Yep.
So with that, we've got a lot of information, so be sure to check out our YouTube videos. We've done some videos on this as well, including our audio tools that we talked about last time. So there's a lot of great information on our YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out and watch a lot of that, so that way you can find all the tips and hints that we put into our videos there, so that you can have the most successful installation the first time and not finding out after the fact that you have to go in and redo it.
Yep.
So, well, with that, what do you say we bring in our special guest?
I mean, we've been talking about audio so much already. Do you think we even need him?
Well, we don't need him, but he is a good friend, and he is a retailer as well. So
yes.
With that, we'll go ahead and turn on the camera here, and we'll bring in Matt Dowd of ReSourced Rails.
Yeah.
Dowd actually is the owner, proprietor, main guy, creator, founder. Let's see, what other kind of names can we come up with?
CEO.
Janitor, plumber.
Janitor, there you go. I like that. But Matt Dowd owns ReSourced Rails. Now, some of you guys may know ReSourced Rails out there. They've become a big name in the brass market.
Yeah.
And I'll let Matt talk a little bit about what that is. And they do retail SoundTraxx products. So
Yeah, I've actually sent a few people their way.
Yeah. So Matt, welcome in.
I appreciate that, Norman. Absolutely. Hey, George and Norman, how are you guys doing today?
Doing fantastic. Having a good
Pretty
day.
good. Pretty good.
Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's fun to be here. Ignore the big giant. If you're watching this and not listening, ignore the big giant microphone in front of my face here. But it's fun. It's what I do as an audio engineer too. So it's kind of fun to have that. But so about me, who am I and what is ReSourced Rails? ReSourcedRails.com is our website there and our domain. And we, as George alluded to, they're primarily focused on brass model trains. It's about 98% of our business. And we love bringing old models back to life and putting them out there on the market. And we also love stocking the SoundTraxx product line and letting our customers pick from that expansive product line and do the installs on brass models. Well, we don't do them ourselves. We certainly provide the guidance along the way, and we tell them always to contact SoundTraxx support if they have questions.
Yeah, that's always a good thing. And that's one of the benefits of being able to do that, is that we do have him over here that's able to help out with any of those questions and things like that. So
Yeah, no, it's fun, and I've sat in that seat every once in a while too, Norman, when I worked for SoundTraxx, so I know what it's like to feed some of those questions.
Don't give away the farm yet. I was going to hold that
that's
on.
right. Oh, jeez, I'm just so apt to tell
cat's out of the bag
stories.
now, I guess.
Yeah.
Jeez. Well, anyway, my apologies. Anyway, yeah, so I used to work for you guys. How are things in Durango?
Everything's wonderful. I will tell you that we had some great modeling times together, and I miss having you guys over, because ever since you left, I don't see Mike anymore either.
I don't see Mike anymore either since I left, so I guess that's two of us, but that's a different story. Yeah, you know what? I loved working on that Missouri Pacific layout, the first iteration that you had of it, and it's good to see it continue to grow and expand over there. And I loved having you over when I had my little HON3 layout in my third bedroom upstairs in my townhouse there. That was kind of fun. That layout lives on. My layout lives on in some portion with another gentleman in Durango, so there's pieces and portions of it left. But yeah, good modeling times for sure.
Yeah, I've heard about that, and
it's infamous.
that it is. I will say one of my favorite times when you came over was one of the first times you operated. So, for those of you guys who don't necessarily know, Matt is a former railroad engineer. He actually has spent time working on BNSF and with Amtrak. And so he comes over and he runs the layout, and I'm over there. So the old layout at the old house was basically a yard and an industrial area. So there wasn't a whole lot of space between the two. So you kind of had to coordinate your movements. But there was enough room on the one end, and you've seen this because you've been to the old house.
I was there too, yeah.
And so he was over there doing his own thing, and I was over here building another train to send to the industrial area, and Matt was doing the grain turn. So all he had to do was pick up 6 cars, drop off 6 cars, and head back. And I'm over here, and I'm playing around, and I happened to glance over, and I was like, Matt, what are you doing? He's got a couple of box cars or something in this mix somehow, and I'm, what did you do? He goes, don't ask me, I'm a mainline guy.
I think I told you. When I started that. I was a horrible switchman. I was a terrible brakeman and a horrible switchman out there. But I could run the engine if the conductor told me which way to go and how fast to go. But that's about it. I ended up with like 16 or 18 cars when I was only supposed to have 6 at one time or something like that.
Yeah,
I had every car on that half of the layout.
I'm trying to figure out how you managed to do that, because I remember how small that layout was.
It was pretty impressive. I remember George giving me a bunch of noise about it.
I had fun, and I was like,
okay,
what are you doing?
Well, so I'm less concerned with the what, more concerned with the how.
Yeah,
how did you move that many cars around on that layout at one time?
It was a case, I think, of at the time of, I think very linearly down a switch list. And that was my problem when I was a switchman. So like if the first car was going to go to track 1, I would put that car over there. If the second car was going to go to track 14 all the way into the side of the yard, well, I'd go do that next, not realizing if I just put that car somewhere else closer to where I was working and then did the rest of the switching on one half of the yard or the other half of the yard, it would save time. But anyway, how I did that George layout, I have no idea. But it is a good point. I really am a model railroader too. A lot of people, assume you work in this business, you work in this industry, you certainly are a model railroader. And it's fun to be able to get back to those roots every once in a while and operate. I actually operated on a layout recently here in Chicagoland, which was kind of fun. I haven't done that in a long time. And don't worry. I was only given the opportunity or the responsibility of running the passenger train. So I only had HO scale people on board. That's it.
I think you might have been able to handle that task.
I can stop and I can start and I can do it quickly.
There you go.
Yeah. So, but it's definitely fun to be in Durango though. And working for SoundTraxx.
But yeah, Matt used to be an employee here, and he was kind of around when we were developing the Tsunami 2.
Yep. As the audio engineer, right?
You got it. Yeah, that's what I started as way back in the year known as 2015. And at that time, I think you guys, George, you were there. We had a few other people there. Norman, you weren't quite there, obviously, yet. But I started as the audio engineer.
It's simple. My age is here minus 2000.
There you
go. Yeah, that's an easy one. Absolutely. Good to have young people in the hobby, though. And I guess, George, you and I are kind of on that cusp of being in the middle nowadays. We're not the younger people involved in the hobby. So, as we kind of grow up a little bit in some way, shape, or form, it's good to see younger people involved, though, too. So I love it. Yeah. 2015, I started with SoundTraxx. We were working on the Econami project at the time, and I got thrown into the deep end and given an audio suite to work with and about 24 steam whistles to edit. And here you go, ready to go. And that was my first project for you guys. And it was fun ever since then.
And I was just saying, it was definitely helpful to have that railroading experience, because when you were here and we were designing the Tsunami 2, we were drawing on that for how certain locomotives run, so we could build that functionality into the decoders. So we had railroaders here on staff that were helping design and kind of draw out the algorithms of how all this stuff is going to work together. So you don't get just a noisemaker. Anybody can make that. Heck, you can open a greeting card that plays noise. But we wanted to make sure you had that real railroading experience, because to a certain level, we as model railroaders kind of live vicariously through our models as if we're running the real thing, because we didn't all get to do that. And so we try to build as much of that reality into it. And, one of the biggest things, being an Amtrak engineer, you were able to talk more actively about how the P42s handle head end power.
Yeah, that was a really fun feature to build into the Tsunami 2 decoders, and one that I fought for pretty hard to be able to have that flexibility in the head end power side of things. And, and when we were doing this too, I also have to throw a shout out there to Jared Ireland, who was working for SoundTraxx at the time. Mm-hmm. Good friend of mine too. I don't know if you've had a chance to chat with him recently, George, or not. But anyway, he was the steam guru because he worked for the Durango and Silverton. So he had all the firsthand knowledge of how steam worked. And, I'd come right off the mainline railroads, right off of Amtrak to work for you guys. So yeah, I was pretty familiar with the P42s. My day in and day out driver, daily driver, so to speak. But yeah, it was great. I was playing with the Blue Nami 44, the 4408 to the Blue 4408 in a red caboose Jeep 9 O scale, and one of my employees had it, brought it in, showed it off, and we were talking about the brake functionality and how the independent and how the automatic works and why it's important to have those two things in there. And then we got to that true idle feature too, about having the locomotive stay in idle versus ramping up to notch 1 when it first starts moving. So, there's a lot of prototype features that are in the Tsunami 2 decoder, both steam and diesel, that are 100%, from my work experience, from my time on the railroad, and from Jarrett's time on the railroad on the steam things too, and the rest of our staff, and of course the customers and the stakeholders, requests at the time. It was very fun.
Yeah. Absolutely. But one of the stories, we did a podcast not too long ago where I was talking about head-end power with the P42s. And I quoted the story you told me once upon a time. It was like, well, the head-end power wouldn't be in the lead unit because it's loud, it's noisy, and it shakes the locomotive. So it'd usually be in the trailing unit. And I said, well, what happens if it's the third one? Was it the last one? You said, no, railroaders are lazy. It's always the second one because it didn't want to walk all the way to the third one to address the issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was a hallmark when we worked for Amtrak. It was never on a lead engine. The only time it was ever on a lead engine is if the second engine was running low on fuel, because it does, of course, use more fuel running head end power there. And we had an incident coming into Chicago Union Station in my career with head end power on the second unit, and it was running out of fuel. And so you could see we turned the corner the last 2 miles of track in Union Station there, and you're running along, and all of a sudden the lights go out, the air conditioner goes out, you go, oh no, it just lost the head end power. Do I stop now or do I take it all the way in the station? Just take it in the station. It'll be fine. It's only 2 more miles. They can go in the dark. I'll get it set up back up on a lead unit when we stop. We're not going to stop now. So
yeah, I love it. But yeah, all those features that we built into there, it was a collaboration of all of us because
totally.
I've never run a real locomotive. So some of the propositions for making some of the braking features work, for example, became a little bit more complex than I think the average model railroader would be able to handle because we were really diving into actual prototypical features. So that was a great way to balance it. And I think it's one of the best ways to implement it out there in the hobby, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree. Having that functionality of both different systems is very much like operating a real locomotive. And it does take a little bit more thought and a little bit more proactive thinking as far as the amount of distance it takes to stop your train with the independent or with the automatic brake involved. But it's fun from a model railroader's perspective. If you really want to make it a pain in the butt on an operator you don't like, just enable all the braking features across the board. Don't tell them what the rates are. Just send it down the road. See what happens.
That's where you're getting evil. Just enabling the brakes. All my locomotives are set up for that, but not telling me the braking rate, that's evil.
Yeah, no, of course I would never do that. Never.
But to be fair, to be really fair, if we're running in the real railroad, the real world, the engineer can feel it at a certain level, but they don't know how much tonnage is back there. I don't necessarily read the manifest.
I know, but I don't have feedback through my butt in that case.
That's where the model train differs so much.
Yeah.
That's where it differs so much, is getting a feel for things. George, you hit the nail on the head. You have that moment in your seat, and if you're watching this, you'll see where you just kind of sit up for a little bit more when you're coming to that big breaking point or that station stop, or you've got to go down that grade, and you think to yourself, have I said enough here? I don't know. We'll find out. No, I take it very seriously, and I took it very seriously. I worked for 10 years for the railroads as a switchman, as a brakeman, as a conductor, as a locomotive engineer, and involved in the training process as well. So I always loved sharing my knowledge of railroading and the best methods of operating trains with trainee engineers and trainee conductors and trainee brakemen and such like that, because that's the best way to pass down that knowledge. And I think I've been gone for the railroads now for almost longer than I was part of the railroads. I left in 2015 after doing 10 years with BNSF and Amtrak. So a lot has changed out there. And, maybe the next series of SoundTraxx decoders, we've got to invent some sort of positive train control functionality.
Yeah, man, we've got to work on getting these cats out of the bag here.
Oh, no. That was just totally I would never do that. That'd be terrible. No. PTC, it's horrible.
Hadn't thought about that. Hadn't really looked at things like positive train control or anything like that in there, because now you're starting to talk about trying to set up some sort of wireless network to let everything know where it is. So
no, of course I'm kidding. But in the sense of, it's just a matter of you ask an engineer today or conductor today, and it's a big part of their job. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so one of my favorite parts about building this decoder, though, and I'll share one last story. It's kind of fun. Is I remember when we first got the first prototype of the dynamic digital exhaust in the diesel locomotives. And the Tsunami series of decoders that had the dynamic digital exhaust for steam locomotives in it. So it was nice to have that chuff effect, increase in volume, decrease in volume, and such. But the diesel prototype, the first time we got that working, I remember sitting in the engineering office, and this was back when the engineering office was separate from the main office at 210 Rock Point, the old address there.
Yep, I remember that. Because you guys were down the street, isolated from everybody.
Yeah, we were on our own island out there. They said, put all the engineers together, see what happens. Oof. No, it was great time. We actually got a lot done. And I remember testing the prototype though of this dynamic digital exhaust, and we had these Otto RTA, Rapid Transit Authority, Metra, basically EMDF 40 PH locomotives, and cat's out of the bag now. That is my favorite locomotive to run, my favorite locomotive to be on. So anyway, I love this. Anyway, we had this locomotive, this model, and of course the shell is, taken off. It's basically just a frame at this point. All we're trying to do is prove that this, decoder is going to go up a notch when it senses a more load on the motor and down a notch when it doesn't see as much load on the motor. And we tested it on this, Kato snap track on the floor of the engineering space because we didn't have a big enough work area to get a grade set up on. And of course, we're, the whole team is involved. Now you've got 4 employees, that are sitting here trying to get this tested. And it was great because we all had good fun and we all wanted to see it work. So we're like, well, what can we do for risers? Well, we grabbed all of the old manuals and such like that and built up these various levels of like trestle to create this grade. And I've got a photo of it somewhere on my phone here. It's kind of hilarious. But anyway, there's books, there's manuals, there's stacked up G-scale tracks. We're running HO scale on G-scale track. And lo and behold, the first time it hit the bottom of that grade and started up and you heard the prime mover notch from 2 to 3, I go, oh, by George, we've done it. This is incredible. And the whole thing looks like it's going to fall over underneath you. But man, that was a fun moment in time there when we saw that feature come to life. That was a really good one.
That's awesome. And I remember some of those rickety setups we'd have to test some of the stuff. But one of the funniest ones was when we were testing some of those things. You talked about those at Metra F40s. We had a couple of them with different decoders in there. So getting one coming around the corner, hearing it chuffing around the corner, because again, we're just trying to prove concept to make sure it works. Yeah. So that's an interesting, that was an interesting sound as that locomotive comes around, chuff, 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 chuff. You're like, wait, that doesn't look right. Forget that. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, form follows function. There's a great saying out there, and that was certainly a great example of it. But yeah, it was a fun time. Yeah,
awesome. Well, we're glad to have you as part of the SoundTraxx retailer family.
Well, I'm glad to be part of it.
You guys are certainly doing some great stuff out there. I hear a lot. You get reputations growing. I see a lot of posts online, and let people know where they can find you guys and what kind of stuff you carry and where they can buy for stuff from you.
Sure, yeah, www.ReSourced. That's ReSourced with a D, rails.com is our web address. sales@resourcedrails.com is our email. Best way to get a hold of us, or message us on Facebook at Resourced Rails. And find the best deals and best prices on brass model trains and SoundTraxx DCC products as well at resourcedrails.com.
There you go. And well, with that, I guess that'll be this segment, I guess, of the podcast.
Sure, let's go with that.
Yeah, that'll do. All right, perfect. Ship it.
That'll do. We're done with you now.
Hey guys, thanks again.
Well, anyway, thanks, Matt. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you later on.
All right, absolutely. Bye-bye.
See ya. Well, guys, that's it for another episode here of Train Talk. I think we've had fun. We've definitely got to reminisce a little bit going down the...
well, you got to.
Well, yeah, that's true. You weren't here. I got to reminisce down the memory of what we put into the decoder and a lot of the care and the thought that we put into it to help, again, bring you the most realistic operational experience that, that we can do for you guys. So... Yeah. Anyway, so with that, I guess we've already run a little longer than I wanted, so...
I keep saying this is a podcast we're going to encounter scope creep, and you keep saying, no, we're going to keep it short, and I keep being proven right.
We're trying to keep these at about 30 to 35 minutes so that we don't take up too much of your time.
And we keep going over.
But we keep going over, so we're going to try to be a little better next time. So anyway, with that, we're going to bid you a quick adieu.
Yes.
we'll say farewell. Thanks for watching. Hope this was entertaining and fun. Be sure to like and subscribe, and tune into our next episode coming up before long.
Bye.